Hello and welcome to another episode of The Meta. I'm your host, Jay Larson, and joining me this week is baby Michael Stone. Hello, Michael.
Hello, how are you doing?
I am well. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you. Am I the only person that has that nickname for you, or is it a more widespread one?
What, Baby Michael?
Yeah.
No, it's just been accepted. It's like on all of my new jerseys now. Like I'm about to get a new jersey from like the Midwest guys, and it's going on there. Like everyone knows.
So is it mainly because you have such a baby face / look so young, or where did the roots of the nickname come from?
So when I moved up to the Virginia area in 2018, I was 19. So I was the youngest person at the store. And one of the guys said I was the baby of the group now, and therefore I must be Baby Michael now. And it just like stuck and kind of just went from there. So that's just. Oh, and I think at like one point, like Pete Soretti and when Sung was still playing, they made like a Facebook group that was the Baby Michael fan club, and that kind of just cemented it.
Amazing.
But I guess there's definitely like worse nicknames that exist. So like this one's
true.
A pretty one to have.
Yeah, that's fair. So before we dive into listener questions, I did want to go over another topic with you. I had recently, a friend had told me that the pronouns that you prefer to have used with you are they, them. And I chatted a little bit with you about it before the podcast to see if you're okay talking about this. I think it's an interesting topic because I think that it's good to show that our community is diverse and that it's welcoming of a wide range of people. So my understanding is that you consider yourself to be non-binary. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And so I guess there's likely some listeners who have not had much contact or experience with people who classify themselves. I guess what does that mean to you?
So personally, like everyone kind of has like a different viewing of like, 'cause gender is a spectrum. So the way I personally view it is that I don't really identify myself as either male or female. Like some people early on in their age, like realize that they're not, like if they're born male, they're like, oh, this doesn't identify with like who I am and doesn't fit right. Like it'd be like if I referred to you as like she or her, like it wouldn't sit right. But I felt that way with both. Growing up, I was referred to as he, him, because that was my gender at birth. And like it never really sat right, but I knew that like I didn't quite like I didn't identify as female either. So after like many years, I think it was kind of like COVID that happened, and kind of like more people were realizing and had the time to have the self like introspections where I kind of was able to look more into it and realize like, oh, there is this like in between that exists. Like there's something that's outside being just male or just female. And that's kind of what it is. It's kind of that like in between. Like I know some people have like he, they, where they like lean more male, but they're also kind of like in the in between as well. And same with like she, they. So it's kind of like just like in between of the gender spectrum.
Okay. So is there, I guess, anything when in the normal course of associating with you that I guess best practices or things that you'd recommend, but besides using hopefully the pronouns that you would prefer?
So I know like personally, like I for the longest time had the bad habit of saying like guys to everybody. Like it could be a group of like women, I'd say like, hey guys. Personally, like that's not something that like bothers me because I still kind of do it. But like I know like if people are looking to just improve their like language overall, like that's something some people might not be cool with. And it's definitely something I've been trying to move away towards. Like rather than guys, I say like you all or like everybody.
Yeah, another one that I've seen some people recommend is when addressing a group of people, saying something like folks instead of guys or dudes or whatever.
Yeah, folks works too. It's kind of just like I guess that's more of like the region you're from. Like I grew up in the South, so like y'all is very
right. Yeah, yeah.
Like stuck in my brain, so I typically like default to you all.
Okay, well,
but just like stuff like that,
ahead, yeah.
like just trying to like avoid, like if you don't know somebody's pronouns or just something, like just avoiding gendered language if you can, up until you kind of like have that conversation with someone.
Okay. Well, I guess, is there anything else on the topic that you think would be useful to cover?
Not particularly. I think there's one of the many benefits of the War Machine community that I've kind of witnessed is it is a very it's one of the more diverse communities of like gamers I've been a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been in many groups, and like over the years, like each of those groups have kind of grown upon themselves. But like in my personal experience, like the War Machine community has been like very welcoming and accepting, which is really great to have.
Yeah, I'm someone who's gay. There's prominent people in the community that are gay or trans or non-binary. So I think it's great that we're able to hopefully be inclusive and share a hobby that we all enjoy together.
Yeah, we're all just wanting to push plastic models across the board and roll some dice, hang out, have a good time. Yeah. So it's cool that people are accepting and kind of just like are like, yeah, like I accept you for who you are. Let's have a good time, play some games, kind of thing.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into the meat of the podcast. Again, this will be around a 45 or 50-minute episode, and then we'll have a bonus episode for the patrons. And I guess to start off, you recently attended Captaincon and won the main event for that tournament. So can you tell us a little bit about how Captaincon was, and then talk a little bit about your lists?
Yeah, so Captaincon's a really cool event. This was the third time of me attending it. They have a cool setup where there's multiple ways of qualifying for the Masters. Typically they do champions. They didn't do it this year because there wasn't much interest, just because that champions roster hasn't been updated in a while. They do champions and what they call standard issue, which is just like the Masters qualifier, on Friday. In this case, it was the top two of each flight, and there was 4 flights. And then they took the best 2 ranked third place across the 4. And then on Saturday they do a 3-man team event, which is the New England team tournament, where the top 2 teams also qualify in. So there's a few different like avenues on like getting in on qualifying, and just like a range of events, which I think is always really cool. I'm a big fan of team events, so I always enjoy having the opportunity to participate in both those and solo events during like the same weekend, which is one of the big selling points of Captaincon, besides being a closer event to me as well. Plus, Seth and Zosha always organize a extremely well done event, so I'll always go to whatever they run. So on Friday, I played in the standard issue. I was playing Kruger 2, Secret Masters, and Baldur 1 Tharn. The Kruger 2 list has kind of changed over time. It definitely changed a bunch with the update. Like I started playing with the Living Beasts again, which was really cool. That's not something that really was done for a while. The update kind of shook up a lot of how Circle looks, which is really fun. Like I'm still playtesting things now that just I haven't gotten to since the update. but like it's still fairly standard to like what close to what I was playing last year. It lost some of the Riot Quest models, but it gained like 2 living heavies and like a wold and like 2 wold weirds, as opposed to like Malvin and like some super solos. But still had like Death Archons, still had Hermit. A change I did add was it got Slaughterhousers for that weekend, because I played a similar list at LVO and I was like, oh, I need some like extra garbage in here. And like the cheapest unit that like actually contributed to work was Slaughterhousers. So I thought like might as well give them a try. There was like no testing beforehand on like what they did or like if they fit in the list. I was just like, I need something else. And then the Baldur 1 list was fairly standard. It was double Ravagers, double Primal, a Storm Raptor, and a Gorax, and like Lord of the Feast. Basically like the best hits of Tharn. I did take double Primals, which is a bit non-standard, just because I thought, like given what I was seeing between like just early testing locally and at LVO the prior week, I thought they'd be a really good fit in terms of just being hard to remove pieces on top of Baldur's Feet. So going into the standard issue, I kind of like, there was still some really good competition in my heat, but like just off the bat, like some of the instant names I think of, I was pretty happy not seeing my heat. Like JVM was in a different heat, Brandon Owens, Justin Dew, like Rich Owens. There was like a bunch of names that are just not in my heat. There were still a few good players, but like it was nice to start off with like not having to see one of those names across from me round 1. Not saying I didn't want to play them. It's just it's always rough having like a early start of the event and like getting some of the harder rounds early. So round 1, I got a semi-local. He's out of Philly. It's Max Kenny. He plays Trolls. And he had Madrek 3, which I was excited to play Baldur 1 into until I looked at a second list and thought it was Gunny 2. So there was a bit of a sign there. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm playing Kruger, and then I gonna fast forward a bit and just say that I played Kruger for the entire weekend, which I guess isn't a big surprise for most people, considering that's typically what I do anyways. Like, I'll just play Kruger even if it's a harder matchup for him, just because I usually just default to him. But I get through get through that round with a win, just able to out attrition him and win out on scenario. Round 2, I play Rick Coe, who's playing CG. He's got Silvestro and Gearhart. And this was like not a pair I wanted to see at all. Like, I didn't have like a good answer to Silvestro. I was seeing a lot of Lucas, so I was like, okay, like Kruger can play the Lucas match. Like, it's very interactive on both sides, where the Silvestro match kind of like has a really explosive turn of like guns that get around Kruger's protection. But I'm able to get like a decent attrition early, based off like a TK on a train and like trading heavy for the train. And then I eventually like look at the board and I'm like, okay, like I can walk Kruger out and not score the circle. Like, I've killed a bunch of his models. This was like turn 3 or turn 4. I think it was turn 4. And I'm like, okay, like I'll just walk Kruger into the zone. There's not much that can kill him, and I'll score it. And I didn't measure melee range to his arc node, and through a chain of events, he's able to get his arc node onto me, which normally I'd be fine. Like, the assassination odds were like 1%, except if he hits the Stygian and crits the Stygian on Kruger, which with how things ended up, he only had one chance to do it. It goes to like a 60%, which he ended up getting the crit, which I'm like, okay, this isn't looking good. And then he gets the arc node on Kruger and like kills him with the last attack to the box. And I'm like, okay, like I could have avoided that, but he took the outs that he had. So now I'm playing for second to try and get in. And round 3, I get Ryan Schmidt, who runs the Blightbringer, or one of the co-hosts of the Blightbringer podcast. And it's a fairly quick game. He made an early mistake on letting 2 Old Weirds get on Azrael, who had an upkeep. And then Kruger did Kruger things and scored out 5 points on the next turn. And then I'm able to sneak into second that way. Through strength of schedule, I think I was up by a point, and if not, I got in through like CPs just because I ended the day with like an insane amount of CPs because Kruger does Kruger things. And then of course, like after getting the results, it's like cool. My next day doesn't matter. So we get up to normal like end of day con antics of like board games, hanging out, having a good time, having dinner like with a group of people I haven't been able to hang out with for a while. Like I think that was the first time I've seen like Zosha since COVID, and like a bunch of other people. I was just like, oh, I haven't seen you since CaptainCon 2020. It's like good to see your face again. Which has been like probably the best part of cons over the past like 6-7 months, is just like seeing people. I'm like, huh, last time I saw you, I thought I'd see you in like 3 months.
Yeah.
So it was just great to like hang out and have a good time end of Friday. And Saturday, the team event, I kind of took it easy. Unfortunately, originally me and Justin planned to team up with Marc Andre, who unfortunately couldn't make it because travel conditions across like Canada and the US changed between when we planned on teaming up and when as it got closer to the event. So he had to bail out from the event. And JVM and Brandon Owens had a teammate who had to bail out of the event last minute because he tested positive with COVID. So Justin joined JVM and Brandon, and I did what I did the previous year and join a team of 2 random people I've never met before and just kind of have a good time and hang out, roll some dice, and play some games, which is always a blast. Like at this point, it's almost CaptainCon tradition for me of just meeting 2 random people and playing on the team event with them. And honestly, that's like super great to do. Like I get to hang out with people I've never met and kind of like go through the matchmaking process with someone I've never learned like their dynamics, which is always fun, and just get to learn how they approach the game. Which after 3 rounds we ended up dropping because one of the guys wanted to get dinner. So I got to watch the finals. And then Sunday I got to do Masters Finals, which was it was a nice relief given my poor performance at LVO. It was just an off weekend for me that weekend and kind of like rattled my head a bit. So it was nice to just like go in and be like, okay, I did what I needed to do. Anything past like round 1, I could lose round 1 and I'm good. Like I've just redeemed myself a bit mentally. Like I'm no longer in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Round 1, I get to play Julian Lasange, who's a great player. He just got selected for one of the WTC teams with Nate. He's playing he was playing Mercs at the event. And we play like a real long like 7-round game of Ostrom versus Kruger. Like I think the game ended, we had a combined like total of like 2 or 3 minutes on the clock. And like the score was like 16-13 in my favor at the end of bottom of 7. Like it was just like an insane round 1 that I'm like, okay, that was real exhausting round 1. Not the most ideal for if I wanted to keep going for the day, but we'll see. And then round 2, I get one of the guys out of the New York meta, came with a battle-driven crew. Names slipping my brain. I feel bad, but I'm awful with names. But he was playing Rhett. He had Gorshade 4 and I believe Assyria, which he drops Gorshade 4. I play Kruger 2 to no surprise. It's split decision, so I won the roll and went second because it's one of the more live scenarios. And against Gorshade, that's kind of like what I'm looking for. I'm looking to kind of close it out early on scenario, because the long game's a bit of a struggle for me. And through some misevaluations and positioning errors, I get to do what I was wanting and close it out pretty early on scenario, just because he approached it a bit passively and I got to like do what I wanted for the turn 2 and turn 3. Like it played exactly how I was needing it to. But we were able to talk it out and he realized some of the mistakes is made, and like we talked out like ways of fixing the positioning and the approach overall. Which is always great. Like always love the post game talks because it's kind of like I get to see like how they were approaching the game in their mind and like different ways I could have approached it. So I'm 2-0 at that point. I'm like, okay, like feeling good. And then after round 2 completely, I look at the final 4 standings and it's like everyone from East Coast. It's like 2 people out of Philly, guy out of Jersey, and me. And I'm like, okay, like this is ideal. Like no matter who wins this event, like a like semi-local of this event's taking
East Coast is going to represent.
Yeah, like top 4 right now is East Coast representation. Like this feels good. Like we're all pretty happy. And then I look at the pairings and I realize I got Kharchev 2 on Invasion, which no one ever scores on Invasion because it's like the most dead scenario ever. And I'm like, this is not what I wanted. I'm no longer happy. But he makes some early mistakes, which lets me kind of like get some early trades in, which is like what the Kruger 2 list is looking to do on a dead scenario into Kharchev. And eventually it bleeds down to a point where he has to commit Kharchev, and I'm able to just kill Kharchev back because of everything he had to do. Like he had to stand in his own hermit aura, and he had to go down to like 3 focus, which we both forgot that he had focus. So when I went in on the assassination, it was way easier than I expected. And then a buddy walked over after we packed up and pointed out that he was still camping 3. Which like we started like looking at it, and like I had to roll like I had to do 13 damage at dice even for the next 2 attacks, so I need to roll like a 7 and a 6, which isn't the most insane. And like even if that doesn't happen, like it's still looking quite good of a table state for me. So it was more of like a good humor that I'm never gonna let him forget. Every time we play, I'm just gonna be like, hey, just as a reminder, you can use focus to stop me from killing your caster. That was a good finish. And then I'm watching my buddy Derek, who also got selected for Nate's team, which really cool. Happy for him. He's been on a real tear lately between like online events and just the last few events he went to locally. And I'm watching his game, and he pulls it out, and I just walk over. I'm like, hey buddy, it's me and you in the finals. Which like that's a great feeling. Like we get to play a ton. We've done like tons of dojoing, so like getting to play somebody that like you're very happy to lose to in the finals is like a great feeling because you leave the table happy either way. Which like even if it's not somebody that you feel that way about, like typically you can leave the final table like pretty happy of like, oh, I made it to the finals. But it's kind of like you lose, you're happy for the other person because it's a good friend who just won the finals, and then if you win, you're happy for yourself. So it's like a nice win-win situation going in. Which we play the Kruger 2 Old Witch 2 matchup. And it was just like a game of like wacky dice. Like I like Wold Weirds failing to kill Doom Reavers at Dice Off 2, and he had a turn where like he devoted like 18 plus points of models to killing an objective and like left it on 3. And then eventually it gets like real close on time. It's getting real down to the wire. Like most of the game we've been tied on CPs. And then I'm able to score 2, engage all of his contesting models that can get into my zone in melee. And he has like, I think at that point he had like 5 seconds left to play out his turn 7. And I got his Devastator out of control and far enough away that it can't get into my zone either. So him contesting is a bit of a problem, especially with just 5 seconds. And I was able to get a Stalker into both his zone and contesting his flag. So I'm able to go up 2, and he has to also score 2 and contest both my elements. My on Recon 2 had to both contest my flag and zone with 5 seconds. So he throws my Stalker out of the zone, and then after he rolls damage, he tries to clock over and clocks. Which, like, we talk it out, and I'm like, hey, like, you hit the clock, like, as you clocked, would you, like, I'm fine with you saying you passed it over to me. And then, like, he points out that, like, the way he threw my Stalker, it's still contesting his flag, so either way, it doesn't matter. All I have to do is just pass clock and win the game. So I end up pulling it out just barely. Like, it was by the smallest of hairs. Like, it very much could have been a game I lost on bottom of 7 if like 1 or 2 dice rolls went a bit differently there at the end of the game for me. But then it was kind of one of those things of like, we talked it out and then we said it was done. We shook hands and then we hugged it out because like we were both like just like there was no better way to end that weekend. And then it kind of just dawned on me that like at the start of this year, one of my hobby resolutions was to win a Masters because I've done Warfare Weekend qualifiers. I've won 2 of those, but like I've always fell short out of Masters. I took second at Warfare Weekends. I've been like top 8s, top 4s of like Masters events, but I've never quite gotten to that point. And it kind of dawned on me that like I finally did what I've been wanting to, and it was just much earlier than I was kind of expecting for the year, which was like a great feeling. And it was kind of just the next like 20 minutes as I was packing up, I was kind of just in awe and like flabbergasted. Like I just didn't know what quite to think. But it was a real good feeling to finally have that happen.
Well, congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
It always does feel exciting to get your first Masters win. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, with that as I guess kind of the baseline, we have a bunch of listener questions to go through. The first of them, we have a few from a couple other people, then a bunch from Bennett. So the first one, we have James Moops Morehouse. He says, you're banned from playing Kruger 2 for the next 12 months. What do you do, and how successful is it?
So I would probably look towards maybe like a Wormwood, because it kind of covers similar things to Kruger in terms of like the direct like anti-gun line approach, and just kind of like as well as fitting the more of the style that I like to play with Kruger, which is kind of the controlling and peace trading elements between like Stranglehold and Hellmouth and stuff like that. Like you can kind of like approach the games on terms that like you want to. So that'd be a personal choice, but you can obviously like there's multiple routes of like approaching an anti-gun style list with Circle. There's like Kruger 1, who I think actually has room in this meta right now with like the amount of Crucible Guard and other sort of like gun lines in the lists in the meta that like Kruger 1 actually has a place again, which is strange to say because that's a caster you haven't really heard of much. Like getting into competitive pairs, which I think is dope. I think Kaya 2 is like a monster right now. Like she's just so good. She brings Shadow Pack, which helps into a good amount of guns. So I think you have a lot of good options for anti-gun lines outside of Kruger. But personally, I'd probably go Wormwood just out of like personal playstyle. I'd probably look at something like maybe Wild Hunts or Secret Masters and do like Death Archons with him because he can throw them out pretty far and protect them as well. And kind of like make a similar style list as Kruger, except maybe more centered around Living Beast since you can fit in Kruger 0 that way. Plus he just plays like Wold Weirds extremely well. Like Curse of Shadows with those guys are amazing. And then for the second list, I'd probably look towards maybe like a Chromac 1. He's really good in like the mirror match, and he's just good in general. Like Bestial's amazing. Warpath is a great spell. Warpwolf Stalker's threatening 16 inches is really good. Plus, like you get to like play the Mark II style Circle where like you get to commit models and then they can't really commit back to you because if you don't have to trigger Warpath to go into their heavy, you get to then Warpath 3 inches away and then sprint for free. So you end 9 inches away from whatever model you were killing, which is always a great feeling for the Circle player. Like the first time I did that in like October or November after the update hit and after Warfare Weekend, I was just like, this feels like I'm cheating. Like this feels like Mark II Circle again, where I just don't have to give you models. But it's not as punishing as Mark II Circle. There's with scenario as more live and as pieces being a bit more volatile. Like there's definitely like those warp wolves still explode to not much. So probably like a Chromac 1. Just he's pretty good generalist caster, and he allows some shoring up of like some Wormwood problems, which is like really big arm skews. Like Wormwood's really good at picking off like one or two big pieces. But like having Chromac 1 who can like send in like 2 stalkers at like power 23 from like 14 to 16 inches away is just really good to have. Or like a Kaya 2, because she does something similar. Or if you're really wanting to like break through armor, I think Kaya 3 actually has legs right now too, just between all the changes to Living Beasts and some added protection that Kruger 0 brings some of the Wild Hunt list now. So probably like a Wormwood or Chromac 1, but there's definitely a lot of options to kind of like change that out.
And how do you think the Power Ranger list would perform?
I'd feel pretty confident taking that like into a convention. I definitely would have to test around a bit. Like maybe the Wormwood list has to like alter a bit from what I'm playing with like Kruger. Like maybe fit like a unit of Valkyries in or something for just added range protection and just ways of protecting Cassius. But I'd feel pretty happy about playing that into a lot of the field right now. Which I know Morehouse is just going to use as more fuel to try and stop me from playing Kruger.
That does sound like James, yes. All right, so our next question, this is from the Glitchy Bit. He says, Privateer Press decides you're going to be the face for the next mini crate. What model would you like them to resculpt in your likeness?
Oh, Kruger 2, hands down.
Okay.
No reason besides the fact that I'm obsessed with that caster and I've played him for like 3 years. If I was picking a model outside of Kruger 2, because that felt like the easy answer and the cop-out answer. There's a lot of good options. Maybe... Yeah, I'll go outside of Circle for this one. A Rust 2, because I'll go back to my roots. I'll stop myself from forgetting that I started the game as a Khador player, and that a Rust 2... It's mostly just based off of a Rust 2 being my favorite caster, and I'd also want a resculpt where he can stand on the board without tipping over because of his flag.
Okay.
Plus, I just love playing that idiot.
Next question from the Glitchy Bit. He says, if the WTC required a pro wrestling style entrance, what would your theme music be?
Ooh, that's that's a good question. I would have to say, if we're basing it off lists or faction, it'd definitely be like Rock You Like a Hurricane or something like that, because like Kruger. If it's just like personal, it'd be Baby Shark. Because Justin Dew has made sure that is my song. That is
and
me.
It feels like you would need to do like the full wrestling over the top performance, etc. Or maybe this is just like a bad pun, but it feels like you ought to be playing like one of the Balders with a bunch of wolves, and then have the theme song be "We Will Rock You."
That's another good one. Yeah, I like that.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. Definitely up there for options. I definitely will have to like think more on that, and now I'm gonna have to ask all 3 WTC teams, be like, hey, we all have to pick a song. What is it?
All right. So next we have a bunch of questions from Benup. So he says, first off, how to not feel shame playing Circle?
You don't. You accept that as part of the very few downsides of playing Circle, and then you overcompensate by being extra friendly to all your opponents.
Okay. Next question from Ben Up. He says, how's Kruger 2 these days?
You know what? Still good. To no shocker at all. Kruger 2 is still good. But he's definitely... there was definitely times throughout the few years where it felt like you had to have Kruger in your pair. It no longer feels that way, which is really cool. And like, it's nice to have like a real nice plethora of options in Circle right now.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still very good, but not required, which is definitely different from past years.
So this is kind of a follow-up question from Ben up on that topic. He says, does Circle list building mainly come down to finding a pair for Kruger 2, or are there reasons not to take him in every list pair?
Personally, I'd probably stick with him, but that's just more preference. I don't think you need to. I think there's a lot of options that, because before you took him because a lot of the casters relied on Living Beasts, and Living Beasts weren't really good at the time. And also between Kruger 0 and the depth of casters that have been added, there's more anti-gunline options, which was the other big reason you brought Kruger. Is like, you either brought Kruger, you brought Wormwood as your answer to guns. Outside of that, like, Circle had a real hard time in the guns. But like between Kruger 0 having clouds, and like even if they have a way of seeing through clouds, you just put them on the models, and now they're -3 range when targeting them. And just like other casters like Kaya 2 and Kruger 1 having like footholds back into the meta, like that's more casters who have tools to play into guns. So like you can definitely make a list that's like make a pair that's like Una 2, Kaya 2, or like Una 2, Wormwood, or like there's very few casters right now I would say like I wouldn't put that in a list pair. And I think like if you're in a meta with a lot of like, I'd say like lists with like sprays that threaten heavies, or like lists that kind of out threat Kruger and are kind of resistant to the control he has. So like something like Legion can kind of out threat Kruger, or like Mercenaries can play like Bart with like a bunch of heavies and be like extremely hard to take off the board for Kruger. Or like Zaltu Immortals has like all the tools to stop Kruger. It can't be moved, it can't be controlled, it has spell denial, and it just trades really well. It has tools for rebuke. So then that's probably when I'd start like moving away from Kruger, because he's not the best into Crucible Guard, who's really popular right now. Like he's like not great into Scorn because of like Zaltu Immortals, and then like he kind of hits like a certain like armor point value that he just can't tear through. So that's when I'd probably like directly move away from him. But I just haven't seen a lot of reasoning to personally as of right now. But I know that there's plenty of Circle players who've been doing well without Kruger.
So his follow-up question is, do you feel like Kruger 2 is an issue? What would need to change, if anything?
So if this was months ago before the update, I'd say yes, he's definitely an issue. But right now, between like all the models that got nerfed, like between like Kogan, Scythe, Death Archons, Malvin, and Windstorm, I think he's just like a really good like option. Like he plays into a lot of things, but he doesn't feel like he's over the top. He feels like a list that has plenty of answers and plenty of hard matchups. And isn't like directly like, oh, I just put models on the board and like I have to mess up to lose this right now. So I'd say what isn't an issue right now, in that like most of his issues before the update relied around the models that were surrounding him as opposed to himself. I will say, I think if like we're looking at it from a balance perspective, he does kind of like limit some things. But I wouldn't say any more than other casters in Circle. Like Wormwood has a similar toolkit in the manner of Kruger, where he has some control effects and he really enables like good models. So I don't think there's really an issue with Kruger as of now. That answer could always change, but he doesn't feel over the top in any manner. He just feels like a really good caster who can kind of be like a good generalist, but also have a string of bad matchups.
All right. Well, we are going to pause there and continue the conversation in the bonus episode. So, Michael, want to thank you very much for joining us on this podcast and imparting your wisdom.
Thank you for having me. It's always a blast.
Yep, you betcha. And thank you to everyone who's listening and supporting the podcast and being a patron. And finally, be sure to check out discountgamesinc.com for your gaming needs. We would be excited to help you out. So stay tuned to the bonus episode.